your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look at what's been making headlines in Alberta. A Crown prosecutor says 2 men on trial over the border blockade at Coutts conspired to kill police officers and believed they were justified in doing so. The trial for Chris Carbert and Anthony Olenek got underway this week. Police say the 2 men also had a cache of guns when they were arrested 2 years ago. BCN's Landon Hickok was at the Lethbridge courthouse on Thursday with more details.
The 2 men, known as Chris Carbert and Anthony Olenek, are being charged with conspiracy to murder RCMP officers back on February 14, 2022, what we commonly known as the Freedom Convoy at the Coutts border crossing.
I believe it took too long to come to trial. 843 days to the beginning of the trial, with these men in remand, which is almost like prison, is too long for them to be locked up if they are found innocent. But even if they're not found innocent, they're innocent until proven guilty. I think law has changed in the recent times.
Just to bring you back up to speed, in the winter of 2022, on February 14th, RCMP officers raided multiple trailers and retrieved 15 firearms, ammunition, and body armor. The 4 men in question, Chris Carbart, Anthony Olenek, which are being tried today, and Christopher Lysick and Jerry Morin, which were charged back in February of this year, were all charged with conspiracy to murder police officers back at the Coutts border crossing. The latter 2 men, Lysick and Morin, have been released, but not before being charged with unauthorized possession of handguns and conspiracy to traffic firearms. So they served their time. They now walk out as free men. But for the latter 2, Carbart and Olenek, this trial is expected to last many weeks. Many witnesses are being called up. The final possible day I've been told of this trial is the 19th of July, so well over a month from now. So for more updates, we'll bring you them as they come along.
The Alberta government has finalized a new air rescue contract. Government officials say the province signed a 10-year deal with Shock Trauma Air Rescue Services, also known as STARS. Officials say the new deal will ensure emergency medical services will remain available across the province. STARS has been vital, especially for those who live in rural and remote communities.
Our government believes that every Albertan deserves access to the very best quality health care, no matter where they are in our province. This collaboration with STARS will help us to deliver exactly that by extending our reach to the remotest corners of Alberta and beyond, so that Albertans can always rely on access to the best emergency services.
STARS operates its own dispatch center, the Emergency Link Center, based at the Calgary International Airport, which dispatches helicopter ambulance flights throughout the province. Social Services Minister Jason Nixon says seniors lodge providers will be receiving some more funding. $60 million will go to support our province's lodge assistance program. That is a $20 million increase from last year's budget.
And given the rising costs of living and inflation, this is an increase that is needed. Our providers are seeing the same challenges that each and every one of us is seeing because of the inflationary situation as the cost of everything goes up. This funding is a 55% increase per person per day to our lodge program. It's a significant number. And I hope that our lodge operators see that we hear the challenges that they're facing and continue to value their partnership and want to partner with them going forward to be able to create the homes that we need for seniors across this province.
Over $22 million is being invested by the province to help foster, kinship, and other caregivers for youth in government's care. Children and Family Services Minister Cyril Turton says these funds will help provide stable and loving homes for vulnerable children and youth who need a safe place to stay.
This is going to mean that an immediate 4.2% increase in funding for those caregivers will take effect beginning of June. with additional increases in the future. And we know that this was the largest ask by foster caregivers throughout the entire province when I've met with them as I've been traveling around. Lethbridge specifically, there are 36 approved and licensed foster care providers, and they care for about 63 children and youth. In the South region, in southern Alberta, there's approximately 1,500 approved and licensed foster care providers, and they serve approximately 3,000 children and youth.
Turton also says there is still a need for more families to become involved in the foster program. After the break, more stories from around our province. Residents in Calgary were placed under a fire ban, asked not to take baths or showers, reduce water use by 25%, and some were told to boil water as the city dealt with a massive water main break. City officials issued the warning and declared Stage 4 outdoor water restrictions following the main break in the city's northwest. The 78-inch reinforced concrete pipe that burst Wednesday evening is a critical transmission line that moves water across the city. The wife of former Alberta Premier Ralph Klein has died. Colleen Klein was 83 years old. Lisa Pinder wrote on social media that her mother had a brief period of failing health. She says her mom can now rest easy next to her father. According to our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson, Colleen Klein had a major influence on Ralph Klein's career, as is the case with many spouses of politicians.
Some of the obituaries that have been written about Colleen Klein in the last 12 hours or so have said, that she used to vet many of the decisions that Ralph made when he was premier and when he was running in politics, both as mayor of Calgary and as premier. So you really get a sense that she was a very important part of his political life, not just his home life and his personal life, but was responsible, at least in part, for some of his successes as the premier of Alberta. And of course, he's remembered with a lot of fondness by a lot of Albertans, certainly some contention over some of his decisions made and some of his legacy, but still, I think a premier that a lot of people look up to. Premier Danielle Smith has mentioned his name before, and she actually posted quite a nice condolence on X, formerly Twitter, on Tuesday evening about Colleen Klein. So, and I'll just leave the watchers with one other thing, and people may recall that Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, when he was a Greenpeace activist, they targeted the Klein family bungalow in Calgary and climbed up on the roof. And the couple's daughter, Teresa, in one of the obituaries, was saying that her mom, who was at home alone at the time, had a broomstick ready and a fish bonker by the side of the bed. So she was ready for battle against the Greenpeace activists that day.
The Blood Tribe announced that they are seeking public input regarding a new family preservation code. Tanya Pace-Crosschild, who is the code coordinator, says this will allow officials to understand the needs for the Blackfoot community members and to learn from those who have been in the child welfare system. She says regaining control over child and family services is essential for healing and addressing injustices faced by the Kainai Nation. Throughout the summer, community engagement information sessions will take place on the Blood Reserve, along with Lethbridge, Calgary, and Edmonton. We all know that nicotine is addictive. Raising awareness about the harm of commercial tobacco and other products containing nicotine is an initiative carried out by Alberta Health Services. Dr. Brent Friesen with AHS says it is wrong that tobacco companies are going after and marketing their products to children.
Commercial tobacco and vaping companies are specifically targeting children and youth and young non-smoking adults. And they're wanting to replace customers who have died off as a result of using the product that they'd sold to them. If they're able to get youth to try or experiment with nicotine products, there's a good chance that they'll be able to recruit them. Studies have shown that the youth, 63% of youth prefer fruit-flavored vapes, and 7% candy flavored. So, once they've tried it, been exposed, and become addicted to the nicotine, then they've got them hooked.
Dr. Friesen adds that young people who use products containing nicotine find difficulty learning, concentrating, and remembering things. He also says they experience more anxiety, depression, or stress, and increased risk of chronic lung disease and damage. The Edmonton Oilers reached the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 2006, following a 2-1 win over the Dallas Stars in Game 6 of the Western Conference Final. The Oilers have a chance to win Edmonton's first cup since 1990 and become the first Canadian team to sip from Lord Stanley's mug since the Montreal Canadiens did in 1993.
It's been a bit of a bumpy road, obviously, whether it be off years or, heartbreak in the playoffs or whatever it is. This was always part of the plan to be in this moment, and I think the group has always stuck with it, and we've always believed in ourselves and each other, and, knew that this, to put ourselves in this position was always a possibility, and feels good to have done that.
According to a recent poll, Albertans are unhappy with 3 bills tabled by their provincial government. Tyler Dawson explains after the break. A new Leger poll suggests Albertans' priorities are inflation and housing affordability. The poll also had a surprising result in that 60% of Albertans are not happy with the job the United Conservatives are doing. Legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, explains it all to Hal Roberts.
They actually broke the polling down into Edmonton, Calgary, and sort of the rest of the province. So there's some separate survey stuff there, but the crucial detail there is 60% are not happy with the way the government is tackling inflation and housing affordability. It's not sort of the entire broad swath of what the provincial government is up to, but it's specifically on these top 2 concerns. Now, I don't think anyone is surprised that Albertans are saying their top priorities are inflation and housing affordability, and of course healthcare as well, always sort of a perennial top 3 contender for biggest issues. But when you have 60% of people saying that the government isn't doing a particularly good job on these priority files, then you've got perhaps a little bit of a problem. And I was looking at this week and thinking, well, what is the provincial government doing at the moment on affordability? And I think probably part of the political problem that they have right now is that a lot of these measures were announced in 2022, 2023, and have come to an end. The fuel tax relief is a great example. That's come to an end. That full 13-cent fuel tax is on every liter of gasoline you buy at the pump. There are some programs that are still continuing. There's the low-income transit passes, for example, in some of the major cities. And the government almost stepped away from funding that a few weeks ago, but kept that funding in place in the end. There were affordability checks given out to families and seniors and those on disability. Those have also ended. So as you can see, there are these measures that the provincial government took, but a lot of them have ended. And there just hasn't been a whole lot of talk lately about what the provincial government's responsibilities or potential actions could be on this file. So I think you can see why the UCP is not polling especially well on this particular issue. We're a long way from an election, so it's not like this is an election issue, but it certainly could become a bit of a popularity issue for them as we go into the summer. People have their air conditioning bills, and then we go into the winter and heating bills go back up and that sort of thing. So especially as we look towards the end of this month when we're going to have a re-energized NDP, the popularity gap in between the NDP and the UCP is narrowing a little bit. I think this is probably something that Danielle Smith and her advisors are, if they're not already thinking about it, certainly something they're going to want to start thinking about.
Now, hey, Tyler, the same Leger poll says Albertans are not happy with 3 UCP bills. Which are they?
Well, it's Bill, I think, 18, 20, and 21, which maybe doesn't mean a lot. But these are basically the 3 bills that would sort of change the power dynamic, let's say, between the Alberta provincial government and Alberta's municipal governments. So, for example, that would bring political parties to Edmonton and Calgary instead of having, sort of unaffiliated but sort of obviously ideological in some sense candidates running for mayor and city council. It would also allow the provincial government to step in and remove a mayor or a councillor in a case of some sort of egregious conduct, or even to push for bylaw amendments or withdrawals, repeals, I should say, on legislation that the provincial government really doesn't like. So these have created, quite a bit of controversy in the last sort of month and a half, taking up a lot of the political attention and time and energy. And we now have a bit of a sense of what Albertans actually think about it. And, you know, one of the things that surprised me about the polling is they actually weren't quite as unpopular as I maybe would have expected. You know, if you look in particular at UCP voters, 52% of them support the idea of municipal political parties, which I maybe would have thought that would have been a little bit higher. Of course, UCP voters, this is their government. And this has also been, you know, quite a popular policy idea among Conservatives for quite a long time, who feel that, especially in Edmonton and Calgary, Conservatives are being jilted. They're not getting as much power municipally as they maybe are provincially. And they think that if you can change some of the party branding, or add some of the party branding, I should say, they would have a little bit more luck. And even 39% say that they like the idea of being able to dismiss municipal councillors. That's a pretty big number, I think, considering that's a pretty dramatic change to the way that municipal government would work. But it's really interesting polling. I mean, because you've had so much controversy. You've had municipal associations, the rural municipalities of Alberta have opposed this, yet Albertans seem to be, if not totally enthused about it, maybe not quite as upset as you would have expected, considering what the sort of discourse in the media and things like that has looked like. So pretty interesting polling on the state of affairs as the legislature sort of rises for the summer, and they'll be back at it in late October, early November.
While inflation and housing are on the top of Albertans' minds, house prices continue to climb, particularly here in southern Alberta. Now, this is good news for those who are selling a home, but not for those who are looking to buy. Up next, we hear from the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge to understand why. The average price of Lethbridge houses has risen quite significantly since last year. BCN's Jeanette Rocher sat down with the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, Trevor Lewington, to explain if this is good news for home buyers and sellers. And speaking of good news, Lewington also discusses the announcement of the $222 million new cold storage facility to be built in Coaldale.
Yeah, it's great news. I mean, not only will it contribute a number of construction jobs in the short term, but it will add 50 new permanent, well-paying supply chain jobs once the project is complete. And of course, property taxes to the town of Coaldale once they're operational. But it's really more important when you think about Canada's premier food corridor, which stretches along Highway 3, and you think about adding new cold chain or frozen storage, really gives a lot of options to local processors, how they store and ship their products. And New Cold has a very long history of using very advanced technologies in their facilities. They operate in North America, in Europe, as well as Australia, actually. And so it's great to see a global player like them invest in our region. Tells me they understand the potential of what's going on here.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense to put it right there in Coaldale, right in the heart of it all. Absolutely. Okay, so where are things at with the new Lethbridge and District Exhibition Agri-Food Hub? I know they ran into some serious financial challenges recently. So are there any signs that things are starting to trend in a bit of a better way?
Yeah, so there was a projected deficit this year for 2024 of about $6.5 million for the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. I know the staff are working real hard over there, both reducing expenses and controlling their costs, as well as trying to find new sources of revenue, of course. Part of the process, so the City of Lethbridge signed a memorandum of understanding with the district, Lethbridge and District Exhibition, and part of that involves a third-party review of their operations, hopefully to give that outside perspective on what could be done differently. And that process is just about to begin, so hopefully we'll learn some things as that report is being created. The key is really booking new events and really finding ways to utilize that impressive space. It's a world-class facility, and just the first week of May was one good example. There were 3 events held simultaneously on the very first weekend. There was the Alberta Esports Provincial Championships, there was Geek Fest, and there was also the High Level Innovation Conference. So if you were there that weekend, it was amazing to see these 3 big, well-done events in the same building, really a lot of buzz and traffic, and we just need to do more of that to make sure we're using that great facility to its maximum potential.
And switching gears here to the housing market. So the prices of houses have risen quite significantly since last year. So is that good news, Trevor? And do we know what is driving those prices up?
Yeah, I think it depends a little on your perspective. It's great news if you're selling. It's not so good if you're then buying. Lethbridge was again a bit of an outlier. In 2023, housing prices on average in Lethbridge grew about 22%, whereas the average for the rest of Alberta was only about 12%. So Lethbridge grew almost double the pace of the rest of the province. A chunk of that is driven by population gains. So Lethbridge grew by 3.4% last year. And so in real numbers, that means we have about 4,500 new people in our region that we didn't have a year before. And so those 4,500 people have to find a place to live or to rent, right? And that's actually the fastest rate of growth we've seen since we've been tracking those numbers since 2001. At the same time, we added all of these new wonderful humans to our region. Housing starts were way down in 2023. So we dropped from about 816 in 22 down to just 243 last year. So that created a real short supply at a time when demand has never been higher. And that, of course, pushes prices up. So we've seen housing starts rebound this year. There's lots more supply being added to the market. That's really great news. But population shows no sign of slowing down. There's still a lot of movement from other provinces across all of Alberta. Alberta continues to outpace the entire country in terms of population. So I think Lethbridge will still see the pressures of that moving forward.
Yeah, I think it surely will. And with that said, Trevor, do you foresee a housing crisis happening here, kind of similar to what Calgary is going through right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the good news is housing starts are up, so that's important. Also, it's in the multifamily category, which is typically where most families start, whether it's an apartment or a condo or something like that. The city of Lethbridge itself is undertaking a review of the land use bylaw, and the reason that matters is, of course, making zoning and building easier, which is hopefully the outcome of that process. And a number of communities around the city within the broader region have undertaken similar activities. So it's a combination of tactics from multiple levels of government, but we need to try and make it easier to build homes. We needed to make it more affordable for people to get into them.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, local stories from around southern Alberta. Lethbridge Police Service welcomed its newest facility dog, which joins the Victim and Witness Services unit. Officials say it can cost upwards of $40,000 to train a support dog in Victim and Witness Services. DWW Cruiser is a specially trained 4-year-old black lab, which will be working with victims primarily in a courthouse setting. Cruiser received extensive training by an organization called Dogs with Wings, but will be eased into his role by LPS staff. As Catherine Pooley, Victims and Witness Services Program Manager, explains, the onboarding of Cruiser is like that of a human employee.
We want to give them a little bit of adjustment time, just like any person on a new job. They would have a little bit of training and adjustment time to learn the role in front of them. We're going to give Cruiser the same time to get to know his people, to get to know the service, and then to start practicing some of the direct service. So we'll go over to the courthouse, spend a bit of time training there. We'll do some training here, potentially over at the Child Advocacy Center. We want to make this a really collaborative approach so that the needs of our community are being met.
Pooley says support dogs can help victims stay grounded in the very stressful process of testifying in court. Cruiser is the second dog with the unit. DWW Court is another dog which has also been helping with staff members' wellness at the Lethbridge Police Service. Families in need of food will be blessed thanks to the donations which will be made from Drive Away Hunger. Vendors from the Lethbridge Farmers Market will donate their leftover produce and food to the campaign, which will then be distributed to the Interfaith Food Bank Society and the Lethbridge Food Bank.
We have a great vendor selection this year, and of course, we are Lethbridge's only Alberta-approved farmers market, which means that at least 80% of what you'll find here is made, baked, or grown in Alberta, and that's something that we're really proud of, is representing the hometown and the local region and getting those products out. It's a healthy and affordable way to do some shopping and support local vendors, support the local community. Our vendors themselves, especially the produce vendors, at the end of the day, they have leftover stock and they donate so much of that.
Officials with the Lethbridge wastewater treatment plant took Bridge City News on a tour of their facility. They offered some insight into the process of recycling wastewater, along with steps you can take to maintain the environment. BCN's Landon Hickok has the details.
At the plant, approximately 30 million liters of raw sewage through 45,000 households get shipped to the plant. The first step is the removal of any solid debris and grit through screening. It then runs through these circular holding tanks in a process known as primary clarification, where the water settles and sludge is filtered out. The process is done again after it's fed to these bioreactor tanks. Here in each of these tanks, varying oxygen levels causes bacteria to remove carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Final Clarifiers pumps out high levels of bacteria and goes through ultraviolet disinfection before finally being discharged through the Old Man River. By decreasing water pollution, it maintains the fish population in the river, it's safe for recreational sports such as kayaking in the river, and it brings benefits to farming as well.
When the solids that are being removed from the wastewater in the form of the bacteria that eats up all the pollution, as well as what settles out in the primaries, go to anaerobic digesters, and that sludge ultimately gets land applied.
Another thing officials are stressing about is what you can and cannot flush down the toilet.
Wipes with the word flushable on the container. They might be flushable enough to make it down the toilet, but they don't break down, and they do get hung up in the collection pipe network.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
And today is the last day of Environment Week here in Lethbridge. It is a week the city sets aside so that residents can take time to connect with, care for, and enjoy the beautiful environment that we enjoy here in our city. Executive Director for Environment Lethbridge, Kathleen Shepard, says events like Environment Week have helped locals make great strides in environmental awareness.
When it comes to things like waste reduction, we can be really proud of some of the efforts that have happened there to reduce the amount of waste that's going into the landfill, and just overall awareness on everything from climate change to water. Of course, has been a big one this year, where everybody's really aware of what's going on with that issue and the steps that they can take to help.
Is coal mining necessarily always a bad thing? Climate activists are diligent to highlight the cons, but what about the pros? Up next, citizens supportive of Crow's Nest Coal joins us to share their interesting perspectives.